Alright, so let's start doing something useful with Git. So we need to start a terminal window, open a shell, and again, as a reminder, this is how to do it on a Windows machine. Look for it here. If we've got an icon added there, we can look at starting it that way. Or I can scroll down to G, the app starting with G, and I can start Git bash that way. What I'm going to do for the first time, I'm going to pin it to the start. So I could have started Git bash from there, or now that I've actually pinned it to the start, I've added a shortcut effectively, I can start it that way. Either way, start the Git bash shell. Once you've done that, we're good to go, and let's continue on. And for a Linux machine, do this. So all we need to do is come over here and click on this button, and we can just click on terminal here, or if that wasn't showing up for some reason, we can just type the first few letters, enough until terminal comes up. Then just click on terminal, and at this point we're now ready to use the terminal and to issue some Git commands. And because I'm on a Mac, I'm going to press Command space and type TERM, press enter, and I've got my shell opened. Alright, and again, this will work on Windows, Mac or Linux, the commands that we're going to type. So let's start by figuring out what directory we're in, and we can type in the command pwd and press enter to achieve that. And that tells me that I'm in my home folder. Now let's now look and see whether the Git configuration file has been initialized. And we can try and retrieve some information from that file by typing git space config space -- global space -- list. And you can see here I'm getting an error saying unable to read the config file. So in a nutshell, that's telling us that the file hasn't been configured, and we should go ahead and do that now. So what I'm going to do first is configure the local Git username for this username on this machine. And I do that by typing git space config space -- global, then user.name space, and then your name in double quotes. In my case, Tim Bachowka. That's now created an entry in that git config file. Now if the file already existed, it would actually make the change to the file, but in this case, because the file didn't exist, it's also created the file. And we can press our up arrow to go back up to the global command to list the file contents. We can now see instead of getting an error, we're getting the command, the username, Tim Bachowka, that we defined in the previous line. Alright, so let's now add our email address. So it's git space config space -- global user.email, and then my email address. And I can do the up arrow twice, press enter, and we've now got the name and the email address defined. And incidentally, the other thing we could do, we could type in vi space, and we could press the tilde and a / .git config. The tilde/, and it has to be a /, is an abbreviation for a Linux machine or a Mac, but will also work in the Git bash shell on Windows for the home folder. So we can actually do that, and that will open up the file that has now been created, our Git config file. Now if you're using Vim, to exit this editor, you press the colon and type a lowercase q and press enter. That exits without making any changes. Now we could have just alternatively just typed in cat and done the tilde again, tilde / .git config, to list out the file to the console. And again, because I was actually in the home folder, if I type in pwd, I could have actually just typed vi space git config. Because we're in the default home folder, it would have brought up the same file anyway. So colon q enter to exit. Right, so let's have a little bit of a discussion about the various types of configuration files that Git uses. The first configuration file is the system configuration file. So values placed in this file are applied to all users on the machine and for all of their repositories. Now the first place that Git looks for these values is in the etc.gitconfig file. Now this configuration file is rarely used though, and we haven't used it to date. So the second method is the global configuration file. So configuration values in this file are applied to a single user and to all repositories belonging to that user. Now this file is located at tilde/.gitconfig, and this file can be used to overwrite configuration values set in the system configuration file. And we saw this file being updated earlier in this video. And the third configuration file is the local configuration file. And values in this file apply just to a single repository for a single user. Now this file is located in a subfolder for a particular repository, the .git folder in a file called config. Now this file can be used to override configuration values set at the system or global configuration level. Now if this file was actually committed to a repository, then the settings contained would actually impact all users that clone this repository. So each of these levels, if you will, system, global and local, overwrite values at the previous level. So we're going to focus on the global.git config file for this course. And again, this file was created for us when we set up the author name and email address in this video. And if for some reason you don't want to set these values, I do recommend you create this file manually because it will be used as we go through the course. Alright, so let's move on to the next video.